Welcome, comrades, to the art of cinema. I am Colonel T, Minister of Propaganda, and joining me once again, whether I like it or not, is our glorious leader, General Secretary F.
Thank you, Colonel. Citizens of the People's Republic of F, look me in the eyes and tell me honestly, who is your friend? Who is your enemy? You have no friends amongst the capitalists. You have no enemies amongst the workers. Only in a union of the workers of all the nations will you be victorious over capitalism and liberated from exploitation. Down with national antagonisms! Workers of the world, unite!
Sir, today we continue to review the 10 best movies of the 2010s, and at number 8, we have It, Chapter 1. It's October 1988, and our story takes place in the small town of Derry, Maine. We meet Jaden Lieberer and his younger brother Jackson Robert Scott. It's raining outside, so Jackson Robert Scott and Jaden Lieberer make a little paper boat to go float down the streams of runoff along the sides of the roads. Jaden Lieberer would go out in the rain to play with his kid brother, but he's very sick, so Jackson Robert Scott has to go out and play by himself. The toy boat gets washed down into a storm drain, and when Jackson Robert Scott looks down into the drain to see if he can get his paper boat out of it, he meets Bill Skarsgard.
Every name in this is impossible to pronounce. Bill Skarsgard, Jaden Lieberer.
Bill Skarsgard is the son of the well-known actor Stellan Skarsgard, who you might remember from such films as The Hunt for Red October.
Ugh, don't get me started. The Hunt for Red October. That awful movie about the Americans outdoing the Soviets in submarine warfare instead of getting nuked by them.
The very one, sir. Many of Stellan Skarsgard's other sons are successful Hollywood actors as well, since Hollywood is a corrupt, nepotistic mafia.
Not unlike the United States government.
Right. But despite being born into this Hollywood royalty, Bill Skarsgard's life has taken a strange turn. Bill Skarsgard dresses up as a Victorian-era clown and hides in the storm drains of Derry, Maine, trying to lure children to him there so he can devour them. Also, Bill Skarsgard is an immortal, shape-shifting, interdimensional demon who finds people tastier to eat if they're frightened of him. Bill Skarsgard can appear to people in the form of whatever it is that scares them most.
So can this clown, this harlequin, Bill Skarsgard, appear to people in the form of capitalist imperialist ideology?
He can indeed, sir, if that's what scares them most, and it should be what scares them most. But Bill Skarsgard is most interested in feeding on frightened children, because when children are frightened, they taste better to Bill Skarsgard, and children have a kind of pure, innocent perception of the spiritual and supernatural that most adults have lost, which means that children are easier for Bill Skarsgard to frighten. And children don't understand capitalist imperialist ideology.
You know, I agree. I think everyone is born an atrocitarian. It's only through the corruption of the capitalist imperialists that they find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, end up as capitalists.
Yeah. Sad. They've forsaken their first love, you know?
Yeah, atrocity.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's Bill Skarsgard's deal, and he lures Jackson Robert Scott up to the storm drain by offering him his paper boat back. Bill Skarsgard gets Jackson Robert Scott good and scared and then eats him.
Okay, let me get out in front of this one right away. There are some people, especially people who haven't been diligently studying the General Secretary F manifesto, who are going to say that it's wrong for Bill Skarsgard to devour these children to death. But what they don't show in the film is that Jackson Robert Scott has been smuggling American books and films into the country. Books and films full of capitalist, imperialist, ideological poison.
I see. That's unacceptable, sir.
Yeah, it's unacceptable, Colonel. We'd given Jackson Robert Scott ample warnings about reading or viewing any media that is not provided to him by the party. So, for as unfortunate as it may be, he had this coming. Bill Skarsgard was only doing his job, enforcing the sovereign decrees of the party. The party engineers the progress of the People's Republic of F, and Bill Skarsgard enforces its ideological advances.
Of course. We defer to your wise judgment, sir. It, Chapter 1, jumps ahead 8 months to June of 1989. It's the last day of school. All the kids are being let out for the summer. One kid is listening to New Kids on the Block on his Walkman, sir, because he's 12 or 13 years old, and it's 1989.
You know, I'm of the age where when we went into 5th grade, we were issued a social studies book, a science book, and then Metallica's Black Album.
Oh, right.
Did you know that I wrote the song Hangin' Tough? Because we don't have any property in our society, and certainly no intellectual property, it's not even tangible. I donated it, of course, to the people. And so it's okay. You know, I made it in the movie. I don't get any proceeds from it, but it's just good to have it out there. It's a great song.
It's a noble sacrifice,
Hangin' Tough. I mean, it says it all.
It sums up the revolutionary struggle, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, the New Kids tried to go like hardcore, and they did that stop playing those game songs. It really didn't work out. But, you know, they were good. They were good when they were singing the songs that I wrote.
Well, that's, of course, why they were sent to the People's Democratic Arctic labor camps for compulsory re-education.
Obviously. As
the summer of 1989 begins, we see the formation of the Losers Club. The Losers Club is a group of 7 friends whose leader is Jaden Lieberer. Jaden Lieberer is still devastated by the death of his kid brother, Jackson Robert Scott. He's racked with guilt about it because he thinks that if he'd gone out to play with him, he would have been there to protect him, and Jackson Robert Scott wouldn't have died.
No, we still would have got him.
Jaden Lieberer doesn't accept that Jackson Robert Scott is dead. He says that his kid brother is only missing and holds on to the childish idea that maybe he'll be able to find Jackson Robert Scott and bring him back home. So Jaden Lieberer makes the other 6 members of the Losers Club spend their time looking for Jackson Robert Scott in the sewer tunnels on the edge of town, even though the other kids in the group find that gross and scary and would rather be out enjoying the summer and having fun. But Jackson Robert Scott isn't the only child who's gone missing from Derry, Maine recently. Bill Skarsgard has been very busy eating them. In fact, people vanish in Derry, Maine at 6 times the national average. And that's just among the adults. Kids there disappear at an even higher rate. But since Bill Skarsgard is an immortal, shape-shifting, interdimensional demon with supernatural powers, he's possessed the entire town. Bill Skarsgard is able to control the minds of the adults in Derry, so they don't question things too much or make any real effort to find their missing children or figure out what's going on in their town.
I see. So who are some of these other children that Bill Skarsgard has recently eaten?
Well, for example, Betty Ripson, a girl about the same age as our heroes in the Losers Club.
Oh, sure, Betty Ripson. Let me tell you about Betty Ripson. I wanted to see her finish school and then be conscripted into our collective labor force as much as any of her other comrades. But guess what Betty Ripson had to go and do?
What's that, sir?
She was secretly growing potatoes and feeding them to her family instead of handing them over to the agricultural collective.
What?
Yeah. It turns out Betty Ripson was a dangerous counter-revolutionary. She gave the secret police some phony excuse about the family not having eaten for 3 days or whatever.
So Betty Ripson had it coming, sir. There's also Owen Teague, who you might remember from such other Stephen King adaptations as The Stand, in which he played Harold Emery Lauder. Bill Skarsgard lures Owen Teague into the sewers underneath Derry, gets him scared by showing him Betty Ripson in zombie form, and then Bill Skarsgard devours Owen Teague as well.
But Owen Teague was a musician, a composer, and he was writing music that didn't conform to the principles of atrocitarian realism. Owen Teague's music was not easily approachable for the common PRF worker.
Oh.
Yeah, it didn't help to inspire revolutionary consciousness amongst the people. So Owen Teague's music was elitist. It established an aesthetic that was only comprehensible to connoisseurs, to an artistic bourgeoisie who could use that music as a form of property that only they could possess, excluding the average worker from ownership. It was musical capitalism, in other words, and Owen Teague had been warned about this.
So in fact, Bill Skarsgard devouring Owen Teague was necessary to keep the People's Republic of F workers moving straight down the narrow path of revolution, sir.
Exactly.
Do you hear that, PRF workers? You've been duly warned. As the summer of 1989 continues, Bill Skarsgard appears to all 7 members of the Losers Club in different forms. Bill Skarsgard chases them around in the form of whatever it is that scares each of these kids the most. Bill Skarsgard doesn't just eat them all right away, because the more he can make these children scared of him, the tastier they'll be when he finally gets them.
Hey, let Bill Skarsgard do his job, people. These kids aren't going to monitor themselves for counter-revolutionary activities.
The Losers Club share their stories of being haunted by Bill Skarsgard. They're united by a white magic that balances the black magic of Bill Skarsgard and opposes it. So the Losers Club starts to figure out what's going on in Derry. Together they understand that they're not all just having bad dreams, and they tell each other that in addition to encountering Bill Skarsgard in whatever form scares them the most, Bill Skarsgard also appears to them all as Pennywise the Clown, which seems to be Bill Skarsgard's default form. Reading the history of Derry at the local library, the losers figure out that Bill Skarsgard comes out of hibernation every 27 years to feed, and that he's been doing so for hundreds of years since Native American times back before European colonization.
Yeah, I would think that Bill Skarsgard would appear to these kids in his uniform, not in this clown getup. Whatever. That's between Bill Skarsgard and his superiors in the secret police. Maybe it was casual Friday at the PRF secret police department that day.
The Losers Club figures out that Bill Skarsgard sort of lives at a haunted house on Neibolt Street. Maybe lives there isn't the right way to put it, but the entrance to Bill Skarsgard's lair is in the basement of the house on Neibolt Street, and all the tunnels in the sewers under Derry converge underneath his house. So Jaden Lieberer leads the losers there. He's still hoping to rescue his younger brother from Bill Skarsgard. When they arrive, some of the losers are afraid to go inside to confront Bill Skarsgard, but Jaden Lieberer says, "Look, you don't have to come in with me. But what happens when another Jackson Robert Scott goes missing? Or another Ed Corcoran? Or one of us? Are you just going to pretend it isn't happening like everyone else in this town? Because I can't."
Okay, what's really going on here? For what purpose have these children consolidated themselves as this secretive militant organization, holding clandestine meetings without obtaining the necessary papers, sneaking into houses around town without submitting their itinerary to the local party boss for approval? Clearly this Losers Club has something to hide. Clearly their story about trying to locate Jaden Lieberher's missing brother is nothing but a front. I'll tell you what these kids are really up to. I bet they're in possession of classified documents about the state nuclear weapons program, and they're trying to sell that information to the Americans. They're so smug, sneaking around town to do their treason. I tell you what, Colonel, this is why we've got operatives like Bill Skarsgard monitoring our people. This is why the PRF has more secret police officers than it does citizens. I hope Bill Skarsgard devours every one of these traitors.
Jaden Lieberer's speech inspires the Losers Club, so they go inside the house on Neibolt Street to confront Bill Skarsgard. Bill Skarsgard plays all sorts of frightening supernatural tricks on them. He separates the losers and plays on their fears one at a time. It's divide and conquer, sir. Bill Skarsgard almost gets Jack Dylan Grazer, but before he can eat him, the rest of the losers come to his aid and are actually able to injure Bill Skarsgard and drive him back underground. The losers have actually scored a victory against Bill Skarsgard, the demon clown. So now, Bill Skarsgard is actually afraid of the losers and the white magic that unites them against him. After the face-off at the haunted house, the losers don't see Bill Skarsgard for a while. Bill Skarsgard is plotting his next move, which turns out to be the capture of Sophia Lillis that August. The rest of the Losers Club goes back to the house on Neibolt Street to try to rescue Sophia Lillis. This is the final confrontation of the film. Bill Skarsgard tries his supernatural tricks on them again, but the losers are able to defeat Bill Skarsgard by overcoming their fear of him. This takes away Bill Skarsgard's power over them. Bill Skarsgard's last play is to appear to Jaden Lieberer as his kid brother, Jackson Robert Scott. This pulls Jaden Lieberer away from the rest of the losers. It's just Jaden Lieberer and Bill Skarsgard now. But Jaden Lieberer finally accepts that his brother is gone and fights Bill Skarsgard even as Bill Skarsgard appears to him in the form of his kid brother, Jackson Robert Scott. Once the rest of the Losers Club catch back up, Bill Skarsgard can't hurt them in the big fight at the end, so he grabs Jaden Lieberer, and Bill Skarsgard offers the other 6 losers a deal. Bill Skarsgard will leave the rest of them alone if they let Bill Skarsgard devour Jaden Lieberer. But the other losers won't betray Jaden Lieberer, so they keep fighting Bill Skarsgard and injure him again. But before they can finish Bill Skarsgard off, he flees deep underground into his tunnels that go far deeper underground than the sewers, where the losers can't follow him.
So, It, Chapter 1, is a story about a political insurgency, the perpetrators of which assassinate a duly appointed government agent who was only doing his job. But it's all disguised under the veneer of being a harmless horror movie. Now I see why the U.S. government allowed for the release of this film. This dangerous, subversive material, ladies and gentlemen. It started off well, with Bill Skarsgard keeping the local population in line by implementing a tough but fair capital punishment policy. But then the film portrays a populist uprising, and the children who perpetrate this mutiny are presented to us as heroes. This is abject fraudulency.
After the losers defeat Bill Skarsgard, they make a pact to return to Derry if Bill Skarsgard isn't dead and awakens again in 27 years, in 2016. The white magic that bound the Losers Club together then releases them, and the 7 members of the Losers Club are never all together in one place again. They start forgetting what they've been through, and they even start forgetting each other. It Chapter 1 is a very good film, much better than the 1990 TV miniseries version, and I think Bill Skarsgard is as good as Tim Curry was as Pennywise the Clown, which is saying something. The look and style of the film are very attractive, it's well acted, the special effects for the Bill Skarsgard monster are excellent, and besides being a horror story, in a deeper sense, it is a metaphor for growing up, for the end of childhood as people separate from their parents and begin to face their own demons and the horrors of the real world as young adults. Stephen King has a touching sense for the magic of childhood and for what we lose when childhood ends and we become cynical grown-ups. I read the book when I was in junior high school, and at the end, Stephen King describes all the adult members of the Losers Club completely forgetting each other after it was finally dead and the white magic released them all. That was the saddest thing I ever read when I was growing up.
That's not correct, Colonel.
No?
No, the saddest thing you read growing up was the United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Of course, my apologies, sir.
And why were the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights the saddest thing you read as a child, Colonel?
Because those documents make no mention of establishing the dictatorship of the proletariat in America.
All right.
Once again, I apologize, General Secretary. You're absolutely correct. I only meant to say that the end of Stephen King's book was sad.
All is forgiven, but it happens once.
The 2019 sequel, unfortunately, that shows us the second half of the story, when the losers all reunite at Derry in 2016 to fight Bill Skarsgard again as adults, was a failure. Chapter 2 is long and rambling, it's not nearly as scary, and the losers are able to defeat Bill Skarsgard again by simply overcoming their fear of him, but it seems to me that shouldn't have worked for them as adults. The whole reason that the white magic chose to unite 7 children to oppose Bill Skarsgard was that children have an innocence and a corresponding spiritual power that adults don't. In the book, the grown-up Jaden Lieberer has to travel into another dimension and defeat Bill Skarsgard in his primal form through a direct incorporeal confrontation, or something like that. Also, the adult part of the story seems to try to link Bill Skarsgard to social problems like domestic abuse and racism, and that's a confused, failed idea. Identifying an immortal, shape-shifting, interdimensional demon who finds people tastier to eat if they're scared of him as the cause of social problems like racism and domestic abuse, that seems to trivialize those issues, I'd say.
And let's not forget, Colonel, that understanding the construction of class means attending to a variety of conceptual frameworks, each of which recognizes that class is socially constructed through ideologies and institutions. PRF researchers have privileged the discursive framework, but at the same time argued that the discursive framework is rooted in the materialist and psychological frameworks. Materialist theories of class combine structural and institutional factors. These are the structure of class hierarchies. That is, PRF theorists argue that the consequence of class conflict are more than only discursive or psychological, but the result of education and political inequities across class lines. Now, the psychological frameworks assume that class identity emerges from a construction of class differences that accords punishment differently to the proletariat than to the bourgeoisie. Identity theories describe the psychological shift that occurs when the bourgeoisie move toward a fully committed form of atrocitarianism. PRF theorists discuss the distinct stages that the bourgeoisie passes through in the development of its class identity. The material and psychological frameworks, on the other hand, are important for understanding the deep-rooted nature of the class divide in the U.S. society, and in particular its educational institutions. However, we argue that the discursive framework is perhaps the most compatible framework for literacy research.
Are we still talking about It Chapter 1?
What? Oh, no. I just thought it was interesting about the discursive, psychological, and material frameworks for understanding the construction of false class consciousness.
Oh.
That's a non sequitur, I know. It's just, I can't stop thinking about the revolution, you know? I love the revolution so much. And for any Americans who might be watching, remember, the day of your glorious leader, General Secretary F, will come like a thief in the night. The White House will disappear with a roar. Your Congress will be destroyed by fire, and the Supreme Court and everything done in it will be laid bare. Since the United States must be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be, Americans? You must live according to the General Secretary F Manifesto, and you must work to hasten the arrival of my triumph. Know that the dread day will bring about the destruction of capitalism by fire, and imperialism will melt in the heat. But in keeping with this promise, we look forward to a new ideology and a new political order where atrocity reigns.
There you have it, citizens of the People's Republic of F, It Chapter 1 is number 8 on our list of the 10 best movies of the 2010s. This has been The Art of Cinema with our glorious leader, General Secretary F. Let us maintain vigilance against the ever-looming threat of an American invasion. You are required to report any non-participation or dissent amongst your comrades. Don't forget to tune into The Art of Cinema again next time to find out which film from the 2010s is ranked at number 7 in your next mandatory re-education session.